It's exactly 6 p.m. here in Cairo. Very good day, dear viewers. It's time for the 6 p.m. Channel 2 News Bulletin. And we start off with the headlines. I'll be right back with the headlines. Stay tuned. President Fattah al-Sisi meets Lebanese veteran politician Walid Jumblatt on regional developments. Prime Minister Mustafa Madbouli receives the outgoing Greek ambassador in Cairo. And Sudan Prime Minister is to announce a new cabinet. Welcome back, dear viewers. President Fattah al-Sisi today hailed the strong ties binding Egypt and Lebanon on the official and the popular levels and stressed Egypt's keenness and interest in the Lebanese security and stability. These remarks came as President al-Sisi met chief of the Lebanese Social Progressive Party, Walid Jumblatt, noting that he aims at achieving Lebanese national interests in order to stray the country away from regional conflicts and threats. The president added that he cherishes Jumblatt's role in maintaining his country's stability and political balance. Jumblatt, meanwhile, voiced appreciation for Egypt's stepped-up efforts for supporting Lebanon on all fronts in light of its leading role in the Middle East. Receiving the outgoing Greek ambassador in Cairo, Prime Minister Mustafa Madbouli today expressed gratitude for Greece over the prompted level of bilateral ties and expanded cooperation in all fields, as well as the trilateral ties binding both countries with Cyprus. The ambassador, meanwhile, expressed his appreciation to Egypt's political leadership and people over their friendly atmosphere, which largely overwhelmed his 5-year work in Egypt. As part of the national continued efforts in combating terrorism, 6 terrorists were killed today in their hideout at a desert area of the Oasis Highway. The National Security Department had received a tip of terrorist location and raided the area, where a gunfire exchange erupted between police forces and the terrorists, which led to the reported deaths. 4 machine guns, 2 car guns, and an amount of bullets were seized at the operation site. The higher state security prosecution shortly launched an investigation into the incident. Sudan is waiting for the announcement of its new cabinet after the country's Prime Minister Abdullah Hamdok held a meeting with representatives of Forces of Freedom and Change to approve its formation. The meeting tackled the issue of forming a commission tasked with peace talks with armed groups. Hamdok asserted that he will choose 20 members of the government according to their qualifications, except for ministers of Interior and Defense, who will be assigned by the Sovereign Council. This step comes within a power-sharing deal signed on August 17th between the Forces for Freedom and Change movement and the generals of the Armed Forces Council, outlining the vision for Sudan's 3-year transitional period. The European Union today urged Iran to reverse its scale back of commitments to the nuclear accord stroke with world powers after Iran announced it was ending curbs on automatic research. Earlier, Iran's President Hassan Rouhani ordered all limits on nuclear research and development to be lifted, the country's third step in scaling down its commitments to a 2015 deal with all world powers. His announcement came shortly after the U.S. hit Iran with further sanctions, the latest in a series of punitive measures, including an embargo on Iranian oil exports. British Prime Minister Boris Johnson's government said today it would make a second attempt next week to call an early general election to try to break the political deadlock over Brexit. Johnson called on the election after MPs approved a bill that could undermine his threat to leave the European Union on October the 31st without agreeing exit terms. Brexit remains up in the air more than 3 years after Britons voted to leave the bloc in a 2016 referendum. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan today warned that his country would start allowing Syrian refugees to flee to Europe if Ankara did not get more international support. Erdogan claimed that Turkey had spent $40 billion on refugees and criticized the West, especially the European Union, for failing to live up to its promises. Under an agreement in 2016, the EU promised Ankara €6 billion in exchange for stronger controls on refugees leaving its territory for Europe, but Erdogan said only €3 billion has so far arrived. A suicide blast in the center of Kabul killed at least 10 people and wounded more than 40 others, destroying cars and shops in an area near the headquarters of Afghanistan's NATO's force and the U.S. Embassy. Taliban claimed responsibility for the attack, even as Taliban and U.S. officials have been negotiating a deal on a U.S. troop withdrawal in exchange for Taliban security guarantees. There has been no let-up in violence in Afghanistan, even though both Taliban and U.S. officials have reported progress in negotiations aimed at securing a deal on ending their war. Hurricane Dorian lashed the Carolinas with driving rain and fierce winds as it neared the U.S. East Coast today after devastating the Bahamas and killing at least more than 20 people. More details in the following report.
But Grand Bahama is now cleared.
Bahamas Prime Minister Hubert Minnis said today that Hurricane Dorian has claimed at least 20 lives, warning that the storm had caused generational devastation as it moved towards the U.S. East Coast. Minnis confirmed that the storm's death toll had risen to at least 20 during a news conference in which he described the damage that parts of his island nation had sustained. The U.S. Coast Guard and British Royal Navy airlifted survivors and ferried in emergency supplies as floodwaters receded in the Bahamas. The Miami-based National Hurricane Center said that Dorian, which has already wrought major damage on its course via the Atlantic, was packing maximum sustained winds of 115 miles per hour. U.S. President Donald Trump said that the United States was sending supplies to the islands, including materials that had been originally intended for any Dorian victims in Florida.
And moving on, dear viewers, to the world of finance and economics, where Egypt's stock market indices collectively rose during today's dealings, boosted by purchasing operations by local Arab and foreign corporations. The benchmark EGX 30 index added 0.6% to reach 14,935 points, and the capped index EGX 30 was also up 0.3%. The medium-capped index EGX 70 rather, and the more expanded EGX 100 index both edged higher, nearly 0.2%. European shares rose to fresh one-month highs today after U.S.-China talks were flagged for October, raising hopes their trade war will de-escalate before it further damages the world economy. The pan-European stock 600 index was up 0.6%, a touch lower from earlier levels, marking its highest level since August the 1st. France's CAC 40 index jumped 0.9% to hit more than one-month high. The rally followed gains in Asia, with MSCI's broadest index of Asia-Pacific shares outside Japan gaining as much as 1.1% to reach its highest since August the 2nd. And moving on to oil prices, which rose today, boosted by easing geopolitical tensions and the positive news about China's services sector. U.S. crude futures settled up 4.3% at $56.26 per barrel, while Brent crude futures settled at $60.70 per barrel, a 4.2% increase. As for other commodities, gold inched higher, and remaining economic concerns in the shadow of the U.S.-China trade war but the precious metal still hovered below its 6-year peak. Spot gold added 0.5% to $1,553 an ounce, and copper rose 2.51% to $5,750 a ton. China and the United States announced today that they would resume trade talks in Washington in early October, allaying fears that new punitive tariffs would lead to a breakdown in the protracted negotiations. The world's two biggest economies have been embroiled in a tense year-long tariff row, which escalated on September the 1st when both sides swapped fresh levels on goods worth hundreds of billions of dollars. The news will be seen as a sign of optimism in a trade war that has weighed on the global economy and stock markets, while also shaking diplomatic relations between the two global powers. The United Nations Food Agency said today that the world food prices fell for a third month running in August, pushed down by a sharp drop in the prices of sugar, wheat, and many other. The Food and Agriculture Organization FAO Food Price Index, which measures monthly changes for a basket of cereals, oilseeds, dairy products, meat and sugar, averaged 169.8 points last month from an upwardly revised 171.7 points in July. That figure was previously given as 170.9. FAO also predicted that the cereal supplies would be more abundant in the 2019-20 period than previously expected.